Episode 6. Who gets your seat when they resign? 46 votes? 47 votes. That's how many people personally voted for one of the 13 councillors now sitting on the Shoalhaven Council. Not 47%, 47 votes out of more than 21,000 cast in the ward.
Yeah.
Marie.
Yeah, it's quite a shock to people who don't understand how people end up on the seats in a council chamber, and the vacancies that come up are due to a variety of reasons. Sometimes people resign, but yet sometimes the vacancies are filled by recounting the votes from a previous election.
So we've had those put in on count. Meanwhile, 2 hours down the coast in your area, Kiama Council, it looks like you're facing a by-election, a bill of up to $250,000 because one councillor moved to Sydney. The same legislation, but a very different result. So
Yes.
Today we look at who gets to choose your councillor when a seat becomes vacant.
So for this discussion, Steve and I'd like to concentrate on what the system has actually produced in Shoalhaven and Kiama. Shoalhaven has filled 3 vacancies, of course, through countbacks. Kiama, sadly, because it's past a certain point in time, has to actually go to a full by-election, and that's an expensive exercise. We're talking $250,000, $300,000 because it has to go through a normal election arrangement, ballots, pre-polling, postal votes, the whole thing.
So we don't get caught up in, and this was Marie's suggestion because I tend to dive into section 46J3 sub-point 4. So what I've done is I've created a separate video which will run alongside the main videos, which gives you the in-depth for the sort of legislation nerds, and there's probably just me and maybe one other person in the whole place that wants to watch it. That's all explained there, why the legislation works, how it works, and what the different outcomes are, and whatever else. So there'll be a link into in this video to that detail. So for this discussion, we're concentrating on what the system's actually produced in Shoalhaven and Kiama. As you say, Shoalhaven's produced the 3, and the central question is simple. Is the system producing a fair and accountable result? So, Marie, what do you think?
I have some strange view, or probably not strange, but to be fair, had I have gotten in on my first election without it being challenged by the ward collective, I would have got in by 4 votes. So now you could argue, is that fair? In the UK, they have a first past the post situation, and we have a preferential system. So I probably felt cheated because it was the I vote, not anything else, and there was lots of loss. So probably my views are somewhat coloured by my own personal experience. So I just want to put that out there to start with. As how the candidate enters, let's have a look at that. So someone resigns, it opens up a seat. Let's use the Kiama one as an example with Mike Keynes. So Mike Keynes in Kiama made this huge commitment about how much he loved his area. He was committed. He was going to take it into a new dawn. And then he decided his business, he made a different set of decisions, and now he has resigned from the council. And given there's a time frame around that of 18 months, that meant a by-election had to be called. Had he have done it earlier, and perhaps in my opinion, he should have done it earlier if he knew it was on the cards, then that meant, to be fair, it would have allowed for a countback situation. So whoever was after him could potentially been in that seat.
So, Marie, this is the other thing too. Is he part of a block in the council?
Now, he's an interesting character. He's run for that many elections, state and council in Kiama, and federal. He actually ran against Stephen Jones at one stage in Whitlam. So He's had a bit of a mixed bag. He's been keen to represent in one way or another, and he was a Liberal. So he definitely was a Liberal for the Whitlam when he did that, and then when he ran for the state election also as a Liberal. Yet when he ran for council, he ran as an independent. So again, we're faced with this situation of who are you voting for? Are you truly voting for an independent? What does that mean, an independent? Or you vote?
As I hear, and you'd be familiar from your federal politics involvement, is that the timing decision may have been deliberate. There may have been on the countback, maybe somebody who wasn't preferred by a particular block may have been known to be the next cab off the rank. And by going to a full election, that's mitigated. So it's very costly for the city, but apparently, from what I can see here in the Shoalhaven, cost to the city quite often doesn't come into block politics. They'll go the expensive route if they can see political gain. So do you think there was any of that at play?
I feel personally there was, because let's face it, he didn't suddenly business rewind. It had to come over a period of time. And so that meant he knew, and he had to apply for a job, which he got in Sydney. So all of that didn't happen overnight, and then he suddenly resigned. Obviously there was some lead up, which would have been a few months, which would have fitted into the 18 months, because it's not that much past that 18-month period since the election.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think you're absolutely right. I think you're spot on, but we can only speculate about that, obviously. Will it come out in the wash? Who knows? But for these people who stand and wave how committed they are to a local area, and then suddenly when it's not expedient or it doesn't serve their purposes or whatever, if people leave because there's illness in the family or one of those things, otherwise your commitment, don't sign a pledge if you're not really genuinely committed. If people matter, our community should matter. So, yeah, you're right. I think there could be a setup here where they were preserving it. And then don't forget, too, when the council tried to make an approach to the government to say, can we not go to an election? And under the legislation, they couldn't. The way it's set up, it has to. So people can blame the Labor government, state government all they like, and Honig all they like. But in fact, it's part of the legislation. If it's not within the 18 months, you've got to go back to a full election.
As I say, I think it was, I forget the movie, it's the law, girly, girly, it's the law.
Yep.
So not much
I like that phrase.
It's not much you can do about that. And we explained that in the other video. There's three distinct examples. So we've had three countback here. And so we had one before a councillor even took his seat, which was interesting. The statement was ill health. Who knows what that was about? That's what got Denise Kemp into the council, which was a quality outcome. Then we had Councillor Johnson go as a result of bullying, and the safe work finding there was it was from the chair of the council, which my understanding is the chair of the council was the mayor, so it was a mayor-driven departure through bullying.
So was there any more detail on that, Steve, or was it just quite simply she decided it was too much and based on that?
She was an extremely competent woman. She was one of Australia's first commander of an airborne helicopter operation. She holds a very senior position at CASA, or may not be CASA, may be Air Safety Australia, I forget what they're now called. But she was saying she was just bullied, and there was an incident with Councillor Wilkins, which was televised, and I might even put a bit of a clip of that in, which was terrible. She was treated. The misogyny was just reeking. And then she said that it wasn't just what you saw in the chamber, it was every time she went into the council chambers, and she was feeling sick just going in now. A person of that calibre, the city lost a great resource with her. She was an excellent councillor. So that's number two. That was number two.
Sorry, go.
Number three was Jason Cox, a Liberal, handed out for Andrew Constance, was well known around here through his work through the Bendigo Bank. He got himself involved in some domestic dispute with his partner, wife. Police were called and there was some drama, and he decided the best thing he could do was to resign. Now, I'm not making any comment about whether he's guilty, not guilty, or whatever. In fact, I think the charges were dropped. But as a result, he lost his seat on council. And the Greens managed to make a return after being completely wiped out at the 2024 election. Deb Killian, who had been a candidate for Gilmore, returned to the council. Now, I think Deb only had, again, it was like 20 votes. It was not a lot. But the thing is that they do have the votes and they are entitled to sit in the chamber and they're legally elected. There they are.
So can I just go back to Johnson, if I may? There's, as you said, a creditable person, a kind of person that you want to see as a community.
High calibre.
Yeah, and the fact that coming from the environment she did and still feeling bullied, I can relate to that. Personally, given where I come, building industry, social work, and certainly 14 years up the hill, bullying, people would have said, she wouldn't buckle under anything. But I tell you what, I buckled when I went to council. I once said, I'll be fine up there, I can handle myself. But I got to tell you, I was starting to find it a struggle. I was starting to feel isolated and being called out. I think I used to love to hear repeatedly, like I needed to have my name told to me in a very rude, arrogant fashion, because whatever I was saying was upsetting the person sitting in the chair. And it could be, you knew you were public, even if two people were watching. You just knew that you felt on show. and that you were being bullied and you were being demeaned and you were being muted. You couldn't say what you wanted to say, and that actually takes a toll on you. So I can relate to that.
It does, and it's just so grossly unfair. Anyone who looks at the video recordings of our council, and I ask people to go and do it, this is my opinion, but I think my opinion is well and truly justified. You have the Mayor Patricia White constantly, I won't say, coaching, assisting. Kemp's got no idea half the time what she's voting for. She keeps asking, what am I voting for and where am I and who am I? Yet our very qualified people, Deb Killian, for example, has worked in council. She's a very smart woman. They just come down on a ton of bricks. This is the mayor again. So I'm not so sure that the improvement notice from Safe Work has worked. In fact, I've written to Safe Work and I've spoken to council saying, look, you can't complain on behalf of the councillors for workplace issues. They must complain. But they've certainly got my support, and anyone who watches it, you can see it's just outrageous, the behaviour.
It is.
In this day and age.
I think it's fair to say if anybody watched the Shoalhaven one, they would see a similar demonstration of a tall, imposing man being quite aggressive, jaw-locking, raised voice and refusing to allow you to proceed with your sentence, shutting you down. And, it's clear there's forms of bullying. Now, that stuff like that went to WorkSafe. There are things in at OLG. Nothing ever got resolved. Nothing. We never heard anything. There was one WorkSafe investigation on a separate issue. Never seemed to actually resolve itself, in my opinion. And going through some old emails, I see that there were some things that we never even got responses on. So you're left.
But that's the sort of nonsense you can get involved with. So
imagine you stand as a candidate, and often that experience is difficult enough because there is a lot of argy-bargy during election time, especially if there's heated personalities and people with a lot of influence and you're an outlier. That's difficult. But then when you get to council and you take a pledge to experience, you don't see it coming. You can't imagine it's going to be like that. And then you experience this sort of what I can only describe sometimes as vile behaviour. Have a conversation, have a robust debate. That's healthy. But there is no need to make it personal, be rude, arrogant, or be a standover merchant. And I think that's the sort of activity that we're seeing.
So at the moment, we've got 2 of the 3 that were replaced here, part of the SIG block, and I think it's also worth explaining here that and I think we've mentioned it, if not in the podcast, but certainly around commentary around it, is the idea of a rat. And we do have, and this is a Labor term for those who aren't familiar, the Labor term largely is about a person who's elected on a party ticket and then betrays that support and does other things. So we've got, in that sense, using that Labor definition, we've got Councillor Clancy, who was elected under the Tribe banner, and then even before, I think, she was talking to me at that time, and even before the first council meeting, she'd abandoned Gemma Tribe and Natalie Johnson. The 3 of them were elected, which would have had a real influence in the chamber. So we lost Natalie Johnson, and then we had Clancy. I'd say defect. She won't admit that, but if you look at the voting record, it's over 90% with Councillor White. Who goes to the conferences with White? It's Clancy. Who builds a reputation? It's Clancy. That's another, I won't say distortion, but certainly not an outcome that was expected when votes were cast.
And what does that mean? What does that really mean for the community? For the community, you thought you were voting for someone and you got someone else. And that means that your expected outcomes perhaps change. That one vote can influence the way a decision goes. So it may seem that it's critical to call people a rat, or it seems unfair or whatever, but in actual fact, there's a lot of power behind that vote. We too had a rat that stood under a Labor banner, was supported as a Labor-friendly and quickly turned to become an independent and heavily votes with the independent. They're our equivalent of a SIG. This is an independent group, and he predominantly votes with them. So where we thought we had 5, we had 4. And that impacted because the mayor always votes with them as well. So it was 5-4 all the time.
We get the 7-6 deal here quite often. And the interesting thing is, though, we've got Councillor Dunn, Carly Dunn, who comes from a well-respected family here, the Dunn-Lewis Foundation. The mother is the Dunn in Dunn-Lewis, and it was about a brother who was killed in the Bali bombings, and they've done fantastic work for the community, and I've got a lot of time for Mrs. Dunn and a lot of time for Carly. Well, you won't talk to me on issues, but I understand that. Why would you talk to this old bloke on air? But she quite often, she truly is, I think, truly is an independent. She does vote against SIG quite often. And she votes generally, not all the time, but generally in a very common sense approach. There's a few things I didn't like about the way she's voted, but so what? That's just me. Okay. So,
but isn't there an argument on that? Isn't there an argument that says, for me, when I see, as rusted as I am, I can see if someone puts forward a valid argument and I can see, in fact, even Kelly, Marsh and I voted together a few times, much to the horror of people. But if it was a social issue, sometimes she could be swung over. And I'm not going to vote against her because I think she's a ward acolyte Liberal. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to say, oh, she's putting together a good proposal, and I think on occasion she saw my proposal and she voted. I think it might only happen twice. But nevertheless, I think it's based on how well you can argue your point. And that's what it should be. It shouldn't be about block voting. It should be what is the issue and how do you feel about it, and prove why you're voting that way.
That's right. The height of the SIG group was one of the election commitments they made. Would there be no part? They want to remove party politics out of the chamber. Now, I know, and I've spoken to a number of, particularly the Labor councillors, because I was a member of the Labor Party, and I said, oh, why did you vote for that? And the response came back, because it made sense to me, and I've consulted with people, and that's what they want. So they're very much, and I can speak for all three, Labor, not on their behalf, but what they've told me, that they do, and it's again evidenced in the minutes, that they will vote for issues supporting SIG and based on the quality of the argument. And that's really what it should be about, the quality of the argument and the benefit of the city. That's the idea.
And also, if you look at a lot of the procedural stuff that goes through has been discussed earlier, maybe workshopped or whatever, and there is a lot of stuff that sails through that a lot of people don't get because we don't talk about the stuff that happens under the radar. People all agree. So there is actually a lot of votes that are unanimous, that sail through, and everything's fine, everyone gets on. And I don't think that's talked about enough. People can be cooperative, but if it is a contentious issue and we know it's contentious in the community, it should be discussed, it should be debated, and that debate should be public.
Again, I keep a running tally of who votes for what and whatever, and the majority of the matters that go before council are agreed unanimously, the vast majority. Yeah. Where we see it move off, and I think there's fairly good reasons for it, is normally a notice of motion that's put up for clearly political gain from SIG, whether it be the dogs on Narrawali Beach or the tree cutting down issues, or a good friend Bob Proudfoot coming on with a bit of pork barrelling for, oh, we can't charge these poor people this money. Oh, I'll give them 8,000, we'll give them 10,000, we'll give them 20,000. Yeah. So quite often the other councillors, and particularly Gemma Tribe, and Gemma did try to get actually put in that if they come up with these, oh, we'll give them 8,000, where are you going to make the 8,000 saving, Bob? And that was defeated, again, on the 7-6 vote. Yeah. SIG wouldn't hold themselves to finding money. And I had to laugh at Clancy at the stage. Said, oh, how would I know about money? I'm just a simple person. If you're that simple, why are you on council? But that's another story.
You get paperwork. It tells you. Read it.
That's right. So I guess the question about these replacements is a couple of things. So what should matter most? Saving ratepayers' money, preserving the role of the previous election, or giving voters a fresh say whenever the identity of their representative changes? What are your views? How's the legislation working? Do you think it makes sense the way the legislation's set up?
It's a real conundrum, and I think it's almost particular to the council in that if you have a well-functioning council and there's not a lot of dissent, or they seem to be able to agree, then a countback shouldn't, within the 18 months, for instance, should be a good option. It saves the community money. The chances are, if you've already got a cooperative type of council, that it's not going to impact bringing in one side or the other. That's my feeling about it. If there's evidence of rational voting. If you get a highly contentious council like yours, or where there is this kind of definite side of conservative versus progressive politics, which I think it is, then I think it needs to reflect the community, and therefore perhaps going back to an election after people have been exposed to this sort of council shenanigans, I think it's probably good that the people get to make a new decision.
Yeah. I think the legislation's pretty fair the way it's set up. I guess personally, because I'm not a big supporter of the SIG numbers, it would be good to see pretty much like a by-election in the federal sphere where people have got the chance to go, hang on, no, I'm not happy, and demonstrate it at the ballot box by tossing out or replacing the SIG person with somebody else or vice versa, whichever way it goes. But local government, it's not the federal government. We don't have the resources to be running off for a $250,000 election.
Yeah, we had a referendum for wards, yeah.
I was thinking about Kiama. So the ward thing would only be that the people who live in the ward, if it goes to a vote, they vote, not the whole city. Yes,
because it wouldn't cost. It surely wouldn't cost. It's expensive, but surely it wouldn't be that expensive unless it was the whole of the region going to vote.
Yeah.
Look at my situation. Everyone had to go. It wasn't just my ward. It wasn't just Ward A that had to go back. The whole of the region had to go back and vote. And yet it was only one seat, that was only one position that was in contention.
Okay, well,
yet we all had to go back.
I'll do a bit of research and I'll get onto that one. Do you think that New South Wales should establish a shared by-election fund so one council doesn't carry that entire $250,000 burden when they find themselves in the current situation that Kiama's in?
No, again, it's another conundrum because one way or the other, you're a double payer. We're already paying taxes and then we're paying rates. So you're going to still put the burden back on people one way or the other. If the taxpayer has to pick up some kind of fund to relieve the ratepayer, taxpayer is still picking up the money. Should a council, though, have a sinking fund in anticipation? Should there be 50-50? Should it be 50% to the state and 50% to the council? This is not a unique situation. It happens all throughout the country. So should there be some kind of recognition that a councillor's going to die, a councillor's going to have to leave due to illness or a partner's illness, they're going to resign because they feel it's not for them, whatever they walked into some time bomb they weren't expecting. There's a whole myriad of reasons why people walk away. The bigger the council, probably the less impact it probably has. But there should be some thought given in legislation about how the bill is picked up. Because when you have a council already in fiscal straits like yours is, then this impost, if somebody leaves and you can't do the countback, you have to go to an election. It's a huge financial impost, let alone the stress related to the rest of the councillors in the process, which is actually quite disturbing as well.
And there's also, isn't there, there's a provision that at the start of the election process, the council has got some discretion on whether they're going to do countback in the first 18 months or not.
So it goes to a vote.
Yeah, so do you think voters should be asked about that? Some way that the voters get a say in that as opposed to just the councillors that are in the room at the time?
No, I think the legislation has put it in for 18 months. I think it's years of testing a situation. I think if you have councillors that get there 18 months, then they've established a bit of a pattern. The community are used to those set of councillors, and a countback is the most convenient, easiest way. But again, it comes back to how much dissent there is. Obviously, in a SIG situation with this domineering, and similarly with Shoalhaven, this domination can be broken by a countback. So again, this goes back to your politicking. Clearly, a council that wants to hang on for grim death, either side, be it progressive or conservative, they're going to use that opportunity to make they're going to vote accordingly when it comes up. So somebody leaves, if it's within the 18 months, if they don't want the next person to come, they're going to put it to a vote in the chamber and they're going to try and win that vote in order to make sure they don't get the person they don't want next.
Yeah. So, Marie, in terms, if you had a message to the residents of Kiama who are about to go to a by-election, what would you say to them? What's your message to the people of Kiama getting ready to face a by-election?
I think the clear thing that people need to learn, and I think Kiama may have learnt it the hard way, both with backing in Gareth Ward and understanding that the people are there, some of them are Gareth Ward's people. I think they're going to have a little jaundiced and angry view about being forced back to the ballot box, and I think their votes are going to go accordingly, and I hope they do. I hope they look at the candidates. I hope and a few of them have popped up now. I think we've got 4 that have put their hand up. They're out there. Some of them are being totally upfront about where they come from. Some are back in that space of not making it hard to find their footprint. And I think go and find their footprint, ask them the hard questions. Why are you doing it? What do you expect to bring to council? And who are you voting with? Yeah.
And even that, as we've seen here with, which I keep putting up articles about, is about SIG. Their election commitments meant sweet bugger all. They haven't backed up with any of them. The roads and rubbish. I didn't see putting in your mate as the CEO or getting tied up in the inquiries with OLG or with safe work and all the other dogs on beaches and all the other bits and pieces. But anyway, that's how it is. So I guess if you're in the Shoalhaven, is in any council area, you need to pay attention, particularly who holds the balance of power and how those councils reach the chamber and what it may mean if that's disturbed. Could be better or could be worse. So final wrap-up from you, Marie, not so much the goodbye wrap-up, but just reviewing what we discussed. Any particular golden bits you want to pull out for the viewer?
Oh, look, I personally think two clear things that we touched on here but didn't tease out too much is the politics of these things are vitally important. Let's take your councillor Steele, for instance. It goes back to this thing about 47, and we could argue again whether is it the numbers or how they get there. Like, how are these people put on a ballot paper first? So we're arguing that a bum's on a seat for 47 odd votes, but the issue is what are they doing on a ballot paper? And our listeners need to recognise that's an important point. If the rubber hits the road on that ballot paper, it's too late to ask about that person once they're voted for. And if by chance we end up in a situation like this where it's a countback and the same person on the same ballot paper with the same kind of characteristics and beliefs gets on that page, we need to be better at the campaign end. We need to educate people. Who is on that ballot paper? Why does it matter? Because a lot of these people are, as I say, the flower pots. They're on there just to make up a number on a ballot paper. They never ever see themselves on council, and bang, you end up with them in a countback situation. Yeah,
I think that's right. I know one of the Labor councillors was exactly in that position. They went on as a sort of backup and they found themselves elected, and they've done a pretty good job. I think with the SIG front, with both Kemp and Steele in particular, they were certainly they're at the One Nation end of the world and they're of the conspiracy end of the world. I think they were useful to SIG to muster votes for those people. From my view, there's a sort of span of the SIG voters from the sort of hardcore liberals who had no place to go through to what I'd say is normal people, the far end where you've got extreme right-wing views, One Nation-y views and even Cooker type views. So there they were on the ballot paper, and lo and behold, they didn't foresee that there'd be circumstances where, thank you very much, here we are in the chamber. I'd imagine that the mayor probably even's gone, oh my God, what have I done? But there they vote. I mean, even if you look at Steele, he really hasn't done anything for the city. He's trying to refire up the voice and Aboriginal issues and whatever else, and then you've got Kemp who thinks everything's a conspiracy and has cost a couple $100,000 asking for reviews. She's a bit like Pauline Hanson. I've had a gutful. I want an inquiry, even an inquiry into parking in Batemans Bay outside the shop.
Resources. People just don't realise staff resources are an expensive
That's right. And the opportunity cost. While they're working on that, they're not working on roads and rubbish. They're working on nonsense reports. So I think you did right. We'll pick that up in another session.
That probably would go hand in hand almost with what we were talking about before about having a finance section, is grant funding. What
we've outlined there, we've got a new one on councillors calling for reports and the sort of the cost of GIPA. There's one bundle. The next one would be about grants, and we've had the situation here, which I complained to OLG about, having grants, effectively grants, coming in as notices of motion. So, Marie, over to you to hit the ball into the stadium. Off you go.
That's all this afternoon we have for you from the gallery. It's been a joy to spend my time chatting to the old fella here, and we're hoping to bring you some more soon. So it's all from the gallery. Cheers for now.
Thanks, and thanks, Marie. As I said, it's always, we can get into patting each other's head. It's always great to spend time with you, Marie, on the podcast. So thanks very much, and we are looking forward to again upcoming discussions with councillors. We've got at least 4 and possibly even 5, possibly even one SIG councillor may make an appearance or at least an audio appearance. We'll just see how we go, and we'll just roll that out as they're coming. So till next week.
Congratulations to them all for doing it.
That's right. No worries. Thanks, Marie. Till next week. Bye.
Cheers, Steve.
Bye.
Bye.